Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition is Mario is Missing, brought to us by Radical Entertainment. During the early 90s, when Mario was at the height of his popularity, Nintendo decided to license out Mario and allow other people to create some educational Mario titles. The real unfortunate problem with it is these educational games weren't made to be very fun, as well as they kind of tricked gamers into thinking that they were a real game, but in fact they're actually playing either a historical game, such as Mario's Time Machine, or a geography game, as in this one, Mario is Missing. So here we go with Mario is Missing for the NES. In Mario is Missing, Mario has been captured and it's up to Luigi in order to save him. You can see that the graphics in this game are borrowed from Super Mario World for the SNES, so they end up transferring quite well and the graphics overall aren't too bad, especially for the NES. But, unfortunately, that's probably the last really good thing I can say about Mario is Missing. When you enter in the castle at the beginning, you can select one of many doors. Each door contains two different pipes. Each pipe takes you to a different area. The areas are different places all around the world. Your job is then hunt down different Koopa Troopers, get their bags which contain items that they have stolen from geographical regions, and return them to the right kiosks. At the beginning of each area, immediately summon Yoshi and bring him towards the area you are. You may have to talk to a few people or gather some items to quite figure out exactly where you are. But once you play the game a few times, you'll know what each pipe leads you, and you'll find out that the first pipe leads you to New York, so bring Yoshi to you. The thing about it is, though, you can't actually return items unless you have Yoshi, because Luigi's not tall enough in order to reach the window. After getting an item, you can look it up, as well as you have a menu system that's at the top center of the screen. You use that to shuffle through different options, including, of course, the items that you currently have in your bag, as well as you can look up your map. When you look at your map, you get to see where Koopa Troopers are currently located, so you can hunt them down in order to get the items back. If you look at your map and you see that you may have just bypassed a Koopa Troopa and you didn't see him, or that you're currently standing on the spot he's supposed to be but he's not there, wait a few seconds, and usually after another character walks by you, then usually the Koopa Troopa will spawn. It can be rather tricky, and it's just probably bad programming overall. When you go to a kiosk, they say that several people have tried to already collect the reward, so she must ask you a question in order for you to actually give the item back, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but it adds some extra gameplay to the game. For example, the first question we had was, what was the Statue of Liberty holding? So you answer a torch, and then you deliver the torch back to the kiosk. You then have to go to the other information booths and do the same thing. So yeah, that's pretty much all the gameplay there is to Mario is Missing. We'll be going to all the different places on the maps and returning all the different items. However, you won't really be seeing anything else. There's no different types of enemies, and heck, even the people that walk around the towns pretty much all look the same. After you're able to deliver all the items back, you then have to find a warp pipe to get back to the castle, so you can then enter the next warp pipe or next door, depending upon where you're at. Here we have the Empire State Building is located in Manhattan, and we've returned all three items to the kiosk here. We can now go to the pipe and exit this area, and make our way to the next pipe, so we can enter the next spot on the map. You also get to see your total score at the top of the center of the screen, as well as you get a password so you can continue on if you didn't want to play the game all at one time. Thankfully also, once you complete an area and go back to the castle, you'll see that the areas you've already completed have red pipes, so you know that you don't have to go back there again. Once again, when we land in the next area, immediately summon Yoshi and bring him towards you. This time we're located in Rome, Italy, and once we have Yoshi, it's time to hunt down those Koopa Troopas. Honestly, the hardest part about the game is hunting down the Koopa Troopas and even sometimes landing on them properly. The hit detection when you do the jumps on top of them doesn't always work sometimes, and you may accidentally miss them, so you have to land directly on them in order to actually take them out and get the item back. Sometimes you may be completely unsure on what the items even are, but thankfully the trivia questions that they ask you are usually pretty general, and may not have to do exactly with the item. For example, you may have seen the spear that we have. When we're giving that back, it's actually usually a question about the Colosseum. Also, if you're not even that great at trivia, there's only 3 questions at most they can possibly ask you for each item each time you play, so you really don't have that many choices to make, and eventually you'll get them right. The second item we're returning is the coins, and the answer to this question ends up being to return to Rome for why do they throw the coins. Here's a question on who painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Thankfully, if you know the Ninja Turtles, you may be able to answer, because even Splinter is an answer that you can possibly give for the question, but answer Michelangelo, you get the money back for returning the item, and now we can go back to the main map as we've completed the first room of Mario is Missing. The first pipe in the next room leads to Sydney, Australia. So once again, the first thing we're going to do is summon Yoshi and bring him to us. With a little bit of practice, you may actually be able to hunt down the Koopa Troopas without even looking at the map. Once you've been to the areas a few times and played the game a couple times, you'll pretty much know where they're going to spawn in each of the areas. Here we're returning a koala bear to its rightful place, and the question we have to say is, where can koalas be found? And the answer is, only in Australia. Here we have to answer a question about the Opera House, which the answer is a sailboat. And the final item we're returning is a giant wave, which is about the surfing competition that's held in Australia. Once we return the items, thankfully there's a pipe right near us so we can jump in and make our way to the next level. Next up, Luigi enters San Francisco, so bring Yoshi over to the west coast of the United States. In San Francisco, the 3 items that we're going to be looking for are the Golden Gate Bridge, the Coit Tower, and the Transamerica Pyramid. Once again, whenever you need to check out where one of the Koopas is located, you can go to your map screen. This is also a great way, if one of the Koopa Troopers hasn't appeared yet, like I mentioned earlier about waiting a few seconds, also going to the map screen resets the NPCs, so you may be able to get a Koopa to spawn that way as well. Here is where we return the tower, so answer the question correctly, and now we have only one more item to return here in San Francisco. At this kiosk, we end up returning the Golden Gate Bridge, which is probably the most iconic of the items available from San Francisco. You can thankfully get into a pipe right next to the information kiosk where you can go down, and now we've completed 4 areas, so we've completed 2 of the rooms of the castle. We now get to enter the 3rd door. The next place that Luigi ends up at is Tokyo, Japan, so bring Yoshi over to Asia. While our trip has taken us now to Asia from North America, it's still pretty much the same things that we've been doing. Going around to the right streets, fighting Koopa Troopas, and collecting items. The good thing is, the maps do get a little bit bigger and a little bit more complex, especially as far as the street layouts are concerned. But it's still pretty much the same gameplay, so it's going to get pretty dull rather fast, and by this point in the game, you may have already turned it off. Over here we get the return of Sumo Wrestler's loincloth. I'm sure the kiosk operator is really happy to have that item back. And last but not least, here in Japan, we get to return the Great Buddha statue. Our journey now takes us to Europe, and we now travel to Paris, France. While we're in France, we must answer questions and return items that have to do with the Cathedral of Notre Dame, the Arc de Triomphe, and the Eiffel Tower. While the whole gameplay and all really gets mind-numbing after you've done just a few of the levels, at least it doesn't take too long in order to complete a stage before you're on to the next one. And there's not a whole lot of strategy that goes into the game either. You're not able to be hurt or attacked by any of the enemies that you actually have to defeat, and the only boss that you have to fight is at the end of the game, and he can't hurt you either, you just have to jump on him a few times. I guess the only thing you can really do to master the game is memorizing the trivia questions or just know it in advance so you can breeze through the question portion of the game. We've now completed 3 of the doors inside the castle and it's time to move to the 4th door. One of the other things I find weird about the game is definitely the human sprites. I mean, the male one especially looks like they were trying to allow you to see both eyes, but it's kind of a weird side view and it really just looks like the head is deformed overall. It may just be me, but I don't know, for some reason that's always bothered me. At least with the female sprite, it looks more like she's actually looking towards the camera, which that means she's not looking where she's walking necessarily, but at least it makes more sense of why you can see her whole face. There is a good amount of trivia in this game, most of which is quite easy, but I have to be honest, I don't know a whole lot about Montreal other than of course being natively French, and the 1974 Olympics. And that's mainly due to the fact that the Montreal Expos of MLB played there for the entire length of their existence. After returning all 3 of the items finally in Montreal, we can move on to the next area. We'll head back to the same room we were in and go into the second pipe, this time going to the location of Moscow, Russia. Once we bring back Yoshi to our location, it's time to start hunting down all the items that we need to collect. While Luigi is traveling through Moscow, we'll have to answer a few questions about the Bolshoi Ballet, the Basel Cathedral, and last but not least, the Ivan the Great Bell Tower. Here we'll be returning the ballet dancers' legs to their rightful spot.
Here is where we'll be doing St. Basil's Cathedral. And last but not least, here is the place for Ivan the Great's bell tower, and the question happens to be, how much does the bell weigh? And that would be 210 tons. By returning now to the main castle, we've now gone through another room, so we can move on to the next one, and we'll be traveling to London, England. I'm sure many of you out there could probably guess the item list that we'll have to return here in England. Or at least the locations of the items that we're going to be returning. They happen to be the Tower of London, Westminster Abbey, and Big Ben. Here's where we'll have to answer a question about the Tower of London, and what the tower wasn't ever used for, which, if you look at the choices, it's definitely post office. Here we answer a question about Big Ben, telling how many feet tall he happens to be. And if you look at the choices, all of them are pretty small, except of course for the very top one, which happens to be the answer of 320. Last but not least, we return the item to Westminster Abbey and we can move on to the next level. After arriving in our new location, we take Yoshi to South America, as we are now located in Argentina. This also happens to be probably the only other area where I had to just look up one of the answers without being able to answer it off the top of my head. Well, I'm sure throughout the game the buildings have been changed up a little bit that we've seen in the other cities, but this is usually the first time where I actually really notice it. The patterns on these particular buildings really are different than the other ones we've been seeing through the game. The first item we're returning here is a rock that goes to the obelisk. If you're not sure what an obelisk is, think of the Washington Monument. Next up, we're returning the first item in our inventory that has to do with the Teatro Colon. The final item that we're returning is a Boladoris. It's a type of lasso that's used with 2 stones on each end of it. It's actually an item that's seen in a few video games as well as a few other forms of media. For example, it's actually a weapon in the Star Tropics games. At this point, we're getting down to the last 2 rooms. We have only 4 more cities to travel to, thankfully. And next up is Mexico City, Mexico. The first item we're returning here in Mexico is the very famous angel, which was put up in order to honor the heroes of the Mexican Revolution. The other 2 items that we're going to be returning actually have to do with the famous artist Diego Rivera. Here they're actually asking us a question on who was Diego Rivera's wife, Frida Kahlo, and I can highly recommend, if you've never seen the film Frida, definitely give that a watch. Selma Hayek did an absolute fantastic job, and so did Alfred Molina, who played Diego Rivera in the film. We're now down to only 3 more cities left for Luigi to visit before he can save Mario. Next up is the famous Egyptian city of Cairo. As we now arrive in Cairo with Yoshi, Cairo is another one of those cities that's very popular that you probably know most of the items that we're going to be returning here, mainly due, of course, to the ancient Egyptians. We'll have to return items that have to do with the Sultan's Crypt, the Great Pyramid, and of course, the legendary Sphinx. One other thing I have to mention about the game, and one thing I actually really do like about it, is on the map screens when you're looking at them, they're very Mario-nized versions of these cities. As you can see, there's still the hills with the eyes in the background, and all the graphics, since they are from Super Mario World, it kind of makes the cities look kind of Mario-nized, even including some of the landmarks that you're actually returning items to, including the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid. After finishing all the items in Cairo, we return to the castle and we have only 2 more pipes to enter, and 1 more room to enter inside of the castle. The first of the last 2 cities is Nairobi. While Luigi is visiting Nairobi, Kenya, we'll be returning items that have to do with the Nairobi National Park, which is a pretty popular animal preserve. We'll have to return an item that has to deal with the Maasai warriors, as well as about the ancient fossils that have been found in Kenya. After answering one last question, this time about the safari park, we can then head to the pipe and we have only 1 more city to visit in Luigi's World Tour. The final city we're visiting is Beijing, China. You can probably already guess what one of the 3 items is definitely going to be here in Beijing. And that, of course, will be the Great Wall of China. We'll also have to return an item that has to do with the Great Hall, and one that has to do with the Forbidden City. Here we return the last item in Mario is Missing. We have to go back to the castle 1 more time. Now we get to battle the final boss of the game. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the boss can actually hurt us. Once you get back to the castle, walk all the way over to the right, and the boss battle will begin. Of course, it's that Koopa Troopa which happened to capture Mario at the very beginning of the game. All you have to do to defeat him is jump on his head a few times. He can walk in and out of you over and over again and it'll never hurt you. After you jump on his head a few times, the game's over and you can enjoy the ending. And that's the ending to Mario is Missing. Just a thank you on the screen, your total score that you got, and you get to see Luigi and Mario kind of staring at each other on opposite cliffs. It's pretty much the exact same thing we ended up getting from the other Mario educational game for the NES, Mario's Time Machine. But with that, that's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.